Three, two, one.
Welcome in, Husker Extra Podcast. You may have noticed that's Parker Gabriel counting us in this week and not Stephen M. Sipple, who's unavoidably detained. He's not in jail or anything. I know that's what a lot of you are probably thinking, but he's out of the office for a couple of weeks. So it's Parker and I. I'm on my cell phone in Sipple's office right now because
While the columnists away.
Yeah,
the beat
Baz will
writers.
play.
That's
I was
right.
going to bring my laptop in here. If he somehow has a completely different hookup for his laptop than what I have. It's like the old USB, or not even USB, the phone port, the phone jack
internet.
I don't even know how he functions, to be honest with you, but that's nothing new.
He's got an internet connection, which, I mean,
you know what? He does have that. I don't know if he knows how it works or how it got set up, but he knows he has to plug one cord into the laptop, and that's enough. So yeah, it's 2:26 here on a Thursday afternoon. We're going a little early this week. Why not? We'll give you guys a little Thursday afternoon treat. It's
right.
Summer. We can do whatever we want. There's no rules. We're still a month away. We're about 2 months away from not from practice starting, I guess. Like a month.
We're like a month from camp starting, plus a couple days, and then 2 months from
2 months from the game.
From right now, it'll be game week. So
2 months from right now, it'll be game week. My opponent, Scott of Illinois, will be in the paper. 2 months from today,
we'll be
getting ready to make the road trip.
Waxing poetic about Brett Bielema.
Oh, I can't wait. I'll have rented a large SUV for us to pile into as we make the drive eastward.
Yep.
And what will be in the rearview mirror, at least momentarily, at that point, will be recruiting in the month of June. That's called a segue, kids. Nebraska's obviously had a big month recruiting, football-wise. Bunch of camps, bunch of commits, a little bit of everything so far. And It's not quite over yet. There's still obviously a week to go before the staff kind of scatters and gets their vacation in and all that sort of stuff before they reconvene at the end of the month and get ready to start camp. So we're just kind of going to run through the guys that have committed the month overall. Obviously, Parker's been on top of this from the beginning. We'll also recap a little Dylan Raiola. Or not, I already got his name wrong.
It's going to be for years and years around here.
Yeah. Dominic's kid was here too, and is pretty good if you haven't already figured that out. So we'll talk a little bit of that too, plus a little hoops talk. Nebraska Creighton got scheduled today. Delano Banton over at the G League camp had a nice weekend last weekend. So a little bit of everything, but we'll start with football recruiting. Like I said, Parker's been all over it. They've added a couple guys here in recent weeks. In multiple different positions. I guess, Parker, just kind of your overall thoughts on what you've seen and what you're expecting here over these next 7 days.
Yeah, well, it's been an active 7 days. I think when we podcasted last week, it was on Friday, and it was right before going over to the Friday Night Lights camp. And so that was interesting in its own right. And we will talk about Dylan Raiola in a few minutes. He's a 2024 kid. Nebraska picked up 2 commitments on Sunday. Coming out of the weekend. The first was from Grant Page, who visited earlier in the month. I think he was in that June 11th weekend. And he also visited Kansas State, picked Nebraska over Kansas State and a few other schools. Sort of exactly what Nebraska's mold has become at wide receiver. He's 6'3" and 190 pounds. He's a really good basketball player, in addition to having led the state of Colorado, in receiving yards at the high school level each of the past 2 years. Obviously shortened season last year with the pandemic, but he's a guy who Nebraska's been on sort of from the start. They had a visit scheduled with him for quite a while before June rolled around, and then got him committed. That's the second wide receiver in the class, which is sort of interesting. We can talk about that. And then later that night, Jake Applegate, who a lot of people around here are familiar with, the standout from Lincoln Southeast, committed to. He could play a couple different positions in college. He's probably an outside linebacker. I know he met with Mike Dawson while he was on his visit. That they sort of see him in that mold, and it's become a familiar one for kids from Lincoln Southeast. I mean, when this staff got here, Luke Gifford, stood out in that role. Isaac Gifford is part of the 2 deep now, where he's pushing for a spot on the 2 deep as a second-year freshman behind JoJo Doman in a similar spot. And now Jake Applegate's going to sort of slide into that same type of role. Obviously, still a year away or at least 6 months away from getting to campus. But so that brought the total to 5 players out of the 7 now in Nebraska's class that have committed since June 7th, I think. Chase Androff, Ashton Hayes, the quarterback, Richard Torres. Applegate, Torres. And so it's been a busy month. And it could continue too. I don't know if there's anyone that's like imminent, but you've started to see this like the number of players committing has ratcheted up as the months gone on across the country. And I think you're going to see a rush of kids make decisions in the next couple of weeks. For instance, Jake Mikula is an offensive lineman from Colorado. He took an official visit in the middle of this week. He was on campus Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. And he said he's going to Duke this weekend, smashing 5 official visits into 4 weeks, and then said that he wants to make his decision in the next 2 weeks after this weekend. So take that through sort of the full first week of July. I think between now and July, let's say 10th, to give it a couple days after the 4th of July holiday, you're going to just see a ton of kids around the country make their decisions. And so there could be a few more guys that have already visited Nebraska that make that sort of call in the next couple of weeks.
It's funny because this class went from having nobody in it, and some people were getting panicked and all these things, and all of a sudden they're basically halfway to filling it. As you've written about, only probably taking around 15 high school kids in the 2022 class, as Scott Frost told you last week. And now they've got 7 guys, and all of a sudden you think, well, they're in a pretty good spot. All of a sudden, at least numbers wise. So yeah, it's funny how fast it moves. How a month from now, maybe they've got 8, 9, 10 guys committed, and there's not a whole lot of work left to do on that 2022 class. So yeah, that's Creighton, right? Like that's how it goes.
It's funny too, because they've got a kid coming in. They've got one. It seems like around the country for the most part, this final weekend is relatively slow in terms of visits, or at least slower than the first couple of weeks are. Nebraska's got one guy coming in. We reported a couple of days ago, Jaden Mangum, who's a 4-star guy. He's a 6'3", 190, can play either side of the ball. Earlier on in the cycle, Nebraska was mostly recruiting him as a wide receiver. Matt Lubick was sort of leading his recruitment. Now he's hearing from defensive coaches too. And it's funny, like 3 weeks ago, people were asking me, like, when are they ever going to get another commit? And now it's sort of like, here's a kid who, Rivals has in the top, 4-star guy. He's a maybe just outside the top 250. Same with 24/7 consensus 4-star player. And the first thing you wonder when he confirms he's visiting is like, well, what position do they think he's going to play? Because they've already got 2 receivers in the class, and that's just sort of the way it goes with a smaller class. It's going to be interesting, Baz, because there's a chance. I don't know exactly when this would happen. It could be soon. There's still a chance that the NCAA is going to extend the super senior rule by another year. So this year, as we all know at this point, Ben Stilley, Deontay Williams, Markel Dismuke, Doman, Honus, those guys don't count against the 85-man roster. Well, if they extend that rule by another year, those guys, obviously, they'll have played all their eligibility and they'll be gone. But that would mean that big junior/senior class that Nebraska has now, the Adrian Martinez, Austin Allen, Vokalek, Omar Manning, Bando. On defense, it's like DeAndre Thomas. None of those guys would count against the 85. Now, some of them might still leave, but if it were to happen where that class also gets a free year where they don't count against the roster, the class, you would go from having room for 14 or 15 to having room for a full boat, just like overnight with one sort of fell swoop from the NCAA. So for right now, for what Nebraska knows, for what teams around the country know, it's shaping up to be a small class all over. But if the NCAA changes that rule on how they're going to count or not count the next class against the 85, then like it would change the complexion of the recruiting landscape around the country just like that. So that would maybe mean some guys get the green light that don't have it now. Maybe some of the guys they've worked out get offers, the numbers of positions change. So that would be a pretty seismic event if it happens. And you would think, now, far be it for me to suggest that there would be too much logic in how these things happen.
Yeah.
You would think if they were going to do that, you'd want to do it with as much time left on the clock in the recruiting cycle as possible. But
you would think that, yes.
Who can say?
But yes, who can say with the NCAA? They got their hands full trying to scramble an NIL law together since they got shot down in Congress.
Yeah, no kidding.
The other day. That's a whole other discussion, though. So, yeah, you think, well, yeah, it might slow down in July and whatnot. It might just be getting going in July and even into August as the season gets going. So, yeah, plenty to kind of watch over these next couple months, as there always is in football recruiting around here. There's never a shortage of storylines or anything like that. And, storylines, we talk about those, and we mentioned them already. Dominic Raiola's kid is pretty good quarterback.
Yeah, he's pretty good.
A junior in high school. Through the Friday Night Lights camp the other night. I'm sure a lot of you saw the videos out there of him just dropping it in the bucket, way down the field, making all the throws. 6'6", or 6'6", 6'4",
6'3", yeah,
6'3", 230. Chip off the old block as far as dad's physique kind of goes. If you saw the pictures of Dom floating around on the internet, and a guy that's going to get every offer he could possibly want. And Nebraska's maybe got an ace in the hole there with a guy that's a legend at Nebraska and loves his alma mater and thought enough of Nebraska and thought enough of the Friday Night Lights camp to come out and throw, and when he didn't have to do that.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, they've made the rounds. They've thrown for pretty much every, powerhouse program in the country this month. And he's picked up, Dylan's picked up offers already from a bunch of them. It's crazy. I mean, it sort of tells you about how college football works these days. I mean, Dylan Raiola, when you watch him throw, you got to keep some things in mind as you're, and try to have a little bit of perspective on it when you're watching him. Like, first of all, the kid's a rising sophomore in high school. Like he just finished his 9th grade year. And he's got, 3 years left before he's going to play in college. Second of all, like, he hasn't even started on varsity yet. The kid that started at Burleson High last year was the son of the head coach at Burleson, John Kitna, who was an NFL quarterback. And that guy's off to Florida and the University of Florida. And so now Dylan Raiola is sort of set to take over at Burleson High, but he hasn't even played varsity football yet. And I can totally understand the people that are like, why are we talking about him then? Like, what is the deal here? The kid hasn't even played varsity football in high school, let alone, but, he goes and throws for Georgia. Georgia offers him. Washington State offers him. And then he goes on a run of 4 places in 4 days this past week where 3 of them were Florida State, Nebraska, and TCU, and I don't remember the 4th off the top of my head.
Baylor, did you say Baylor?
Yeah, Baylor, yeah. So Nebraska, Florida State, Baylor, and TCU, he goes 4 days in a row and gets offers from all 4 schools, as he throws sort of in front of their coaching staff. So, I mean, it's super interesting and in listening to Dom, who was on the radio with Sipple earlier this week, Nebraska is going to be in the picture, and it's sort of silly. In a way, it's silly to even talk about that at this point because he's so far away from signing. But it just adds sort of like another wrinkle to the intrigue about if Nebraska is going to get it going and what's going to happen this fall, because you can imagine with all of like the things you just mentioned, obviously Dom's one of the best players in school history, played 14 years in the NFL. His numbers up there above North Stadium. He loves it here. He loves Nebraska. He knows and respects Scott and Matt Davison. And he talked about Joni Duff, the administrative assistant, like sort of like the ties that bind, And then on top of that, Tony Tuioti, you've got the Hawaiian connection, with Tuioti on staff. And Dylan sort of made a mention of Tony and talking about and tweeting about coming up here. And he, Tony's not from here. He didn't go to school here, but you've got that going for you. Frost has had Mackenzie Milton. And obviously Dylan's a kid from Texas. He's not from Hawaii, but he's got the family lineage and I'm sure knows what Frost, did with Marcus Mariota and Mackenzie Milton. And they're like all of these chips. You can count all of these chips in Nebraska's favor. But at the end of the day, like, if he really ascends to 5-star status or he's a top 100 quarterback or whatever, like those decisions are made with your head, not your heart, when you're a recruit like that. And so it's a storyline that's going to be super interesting to watch, almost on a daily basis from now until
for the next 3 years.
Yeah. Basically. For the next 3 years. Yeah. Yeah. So
every single day.
It's crazy. It's a fascinating storyline and it got a ton of attention this week, and that's not exactly fair for a 9th grade kid, but it's the way it's going to be with him, not just here, but everywhere, because he's got the look and the makings early on of being a really special player.
Yeah. It's just one more thing you can kind of add to the layer of this season, right? Like they need to win, and they need to win for a lot of reasons, but we need to win because there's a freshman quarterback in high school. It's going to be a sophomore that might be pretty good in 3 years that we might want to get. We might not get him if we don't win games. So it's just you just have to laugh because it's just kind of the absurdity of college football, right? Like we all love it. We all love to follow it, but man, you sit there and you kind of talk through it and you realize, what you're talking about a little bit. Right. Like kid's 14 years old, 15 years old, whatever it may be. And so, hell, Adrian Martinez might still be here in 3 years if they keep passing Super Bowl.
Could be a 7th-year starter. It's funny though, Baz. It distills really clearly though, like why people are always so interested in recruiting, because it's about what could be, right? Like it's just over the horizon. And it was really, sort of, if you're a dreaming Nebraska fan, it's a pretty seductive picture over there last weekend with Dylan Raiola throwing the ball to Ben Bramer, who's a 2023 tight end who's already committed to Nebraska, and throwing it to Davon Hall, the kid who's the same age as Dylan and already, is a standout type at Bellevue West and is probably primed for a huge year this year. Like it's just, you can squint and see all 3 guys and what their futures might look like. And then you also consider Bramer's already committed here, but the other 2 guys could well end up somewhere else if they're not fully confident in what it looks like around here over the course of time. Yeah. So this is and
you can also, and you can imagine too, them coming here because Nebraska did get it going, kind of like you said,
right.
Not that Nebraska's going to go out and win 12 games each of the next 3 years or anything like that. But if you think about them coming here, they're probably coming here because Nebraska's playing pretty good football and winning a lot of games. So that's the other, kind of seductive part of it too. So yeah, it's fascinating stuff. And it makes it even more interesting with just the familiarity angle. Like we talked about, with Dom, that clearly Dylan has a pretty good head on his shoulders. And that comes from his dad, a lot of that, and his mom, both high level athletes and having gone through that and all that stuff. So yeah, it's going to be a deal where you don't think Dylan's probably going to make a real rash decision when it comes to this. It's going to be thought out 3 years from now, whenever he does commit, and he's going to have a lot of good info to look back on, certainly.
Yep.
Speaking of good info.
Yeah, let's
switch
keep it rolling. You're on a segue. You're on a segue bender today.
What do you got? No, what do you got?
No, all I was gonna say was there was a very. See, I totally ruined the segue. Let's see. I'm gonna put you on the spot again then to see if you can segue out of this. Over there, I was obviously watching the kids that were taking part in the camp, and I was watching Dylan and throwing to some of those guys and all that. And at one point, I just happened to sort of. I saw Dom. He was on the field, and he was standing there with Matt Davison and sort of a few other people, and
looking like a dude.
Yeah. But he was just like looking around. He was looking up in the he was looking up to East Stadium, and he was you could tell he was just sort of taking it in. And it's cool, no matter what happens with Dylan over the course of time. Like sometimes we wonder about, guys coming back or their connection to the program and all that. And with Dominic, like he just played in the NFL for so long. And then he has, they've got 3 kids and his daughter's playing volleyball at TCU and went through the recruiting thing a couple of years ago. Dylan's obviously going through it now. They've been on the road constantly like that. And it's not like there's nothing wrong with what Dominic, at least I know of, and like his relationship with the program, not at all, but just like busy guy, busy life, doesn't make it back up this way all that often. So it was cool just on a random June Friday that obviously had a special meaning for the family with Dylan working out and all that. But it was cool to just see him down there sort of taking it in and getting a good look at Memorial Stadium while he was in town.
Yeah, there's always that side of it. That's the side we forget, right? Like, Dom's a person like you and I are. Dylan's a person like you and I are. Now they're extraordinarily talented people in what they do.
Unlike you and I, yeah.
Unlike you and I, yeah. Well, me for certain, but no, it's just like that's part of it. Like that's part of living and part of having a life experience is having those moments and being able to watch your kid do that, like Dom did, and Dylan now getting a chance to maybe follow dad's footsteps if that's something he's interested in doing. So that's the other part of it too. That's the part that always kind of interests me, is that the human side of it. Just, why, Dom looking around, did Dylan come in and see his dad's name and go, maybe he had a moment there where he thought that was pretty cool, where it kind of hit home for him. So yeah, just super cool. It's a neat story. Like you said, it'll be fun to watch for the next 3 years. Here's the segue for you. Here's a story to watch for the next few weeks. Switching to hoops, Dalano Banton, Nebraska guard, had a nice weekend last week at the G League Elite Camp. It was kind of an interesting story. He declared for the draft, of course, a couple weeks ago. Didn't get an invite initially to the G League camp, as maybe worked out for a couple teams, nothing major. But then they had a guy drop out of this G League Elite Camp, and Dalano Banton got a call saying, "Hey, can you come fill a spot on this roster?" So Banton goes, ends up having a pretty good weekend. By all accounts, the best passer at this G League Elite Camp. You kind of search the internet, you see guys that are experts in the field just rave about his feel for the game and the court vision. And it's funny because it's everything that we saw here, except it was seen like on the next stage by the scouts and the GMs and the NBA people. Like, he's great feel, great court vision, innate passer, can't shoot it. So I think he went 0 for 6 in the 2 games he played from 3-point range, but was still named, one of the top performers at that camp. He didn't get an invite to the combine, the NBA combine this week, which probably tells you the direction this is headed as far as it comes to the decision Dalano has to make. I believe July 7th is the date. He has to declare whether he'll be returning to Nebraska or stay in the NBA draft. And road seems pretty clear at this point that he'll come back, not even though he did have a good camp, didn't get the invite to the combine and couldn't really test out that way. So, but still one of those deals you'll see if Nebraska keeps recruiting the type of guys they're recruiting, you're going to see this a lot more from guys that Nebraska brings in. And it hasn't always been that way. Of course, we saw it with Isaiah Roby a couple of years ago. He obviously parlayed that into a 2nd-round draft pick, and I believe at the time became the highest paid 2nd-round player in NBA history when he finally got his contract. So you're going to start seeing that a lot more, just with the guys Nebraska brings in. They're going to bring in high-level guys with NBA aspirations, and they're going to go try their hand at these G League camps, combines, work out for teams, whatever it may be, and they're going to get that type of feedback when they come back to Lincoln and get ready for the next season. So nothing but a good experience, I don't think. But for Dalano Banton, he knows what he has to get better at. It's, we're not breaking any new ground or anything. If he's able to develop a consistent, perimeter jumper, he becomes a really dangerous player. And he's already pretty good, just with the length and the size and the ability to rebound and get his hands in the passing lanes and things like that. He can already do a bunch of stuff, but there's always things you can improve on. I think Dalano got a really good look at, hey, I'm not too far away from being at the same level as a lot of these guys that are going to be pros, but I still have a ways to go if I want to get to if I want to be in serious consideration for what that next step may be. So he's got the personality for it, certainly, comfortable with the media and comfortable around teammates and very outgoing and things like that. He's got a lot of the intangible stuff you look for. And he also has a lot of the physical stuff you look for, but the physical shortcomings are pretty obvious. When you want, easy for me to say physical shortcomings. I'm a 5'10" dude who didn't play after high school and barely played in high school, but it's a good way, I think, to kind of reinforce what, maybe Fred Hoiberg has been telling you, what the coaches, what Nate Lenzer's been telling you, those sorts of things that Nebraska say, oh yeah, okay, I get it now. I see it. I understand. So I would expect Delano's going to be back in a Nebraska uniform this year. Would be very, very surprised if he stayed in the draft. And I think this weekend just kind of showed him where he needs to go and what he needs to do to take that next step.
It's interesting because you're right. It's nothing but a good experience. You go and you get in front of NBA teams and they can tell you exactly what you need to work on. Like with Banton, there's an element of it that's like, of course, what they told him was, you got to refine the jumper. You got to be able to, knock it down consistently. So in that way, it's like, there's some reinforcement there, but I do find it funny. It's like, oh, I bet he got a lot of good feedback. Like, it's, hey, you're really good, but you need to shoot it, you got to be able to shoot it. So I'm not an expert, obviously, but there's a lot to like about the game. There's just the one big element, and we'll see. I mean, Fred talked about it being the first time he's really played the point and been asked to run an offense in his career. And so there's probably, to the extent that they ask him to do that this upcoming season, I'm sure that there's some stuff that maybe you can pick up by working out with guys and in front of teams about the subtleties of running an offense. But yeah, I mean, if he continues on that path, he's obviously got a lot of natural talent, and then it's just a question of how often does he knock it down?
Yeah, well, and there's two other points to this too, right? Like, not every guy that's drafted in the NBA draft is drafted with the idea that he's going to become a superstar, right? Like you're drafting guys that are going to play roles. And Dalano Banton certainly can play a role. He can rebound, he can get out and run the break, and he can find guys. It's really not all that different from Isaiah Roby when you look at the skill set. Now, Roby's probably got the better jumper. Banton's probably a better ball handler, maybe a little bit better passer. But you look at what a guy like Isaiah Roby did this last year for the OKC Thunder. And yeah, he played on a bad team, but he put up really good numbers for a second-round draft pick, kind of getting his feet wet. And you can see that for Delano. You see the path there. And Dalano Banton's not going to get drafted because he's going to be a surefire day one starter for an NBA team. But he's going to get drafted because he can go in and be a guy that comes off the bench and gives you rebounding, can give you length on defense, and can give you ball handling and passing. And maybe you're able to refine the shot once you get him into an NBA type setting, depending on what he does at Nebraska, should he stay at Nebraska these next couple of years. So yeah, I think it's easy to get caught up in if you get drafted in the NBA, that means you're going to go in and play a bunch right away. Well, no, not necessarily. You might be drafted because you're going to go play a role. And it's a matter of, role acceptance. We hear that all the time. Does Delano want to accept that type of role? And I would bet a lot of those guys would. I think Delano's a guy that's really worked to get to where he's at. I think he has a pretty good grasp on reality as far as things like that. So another interesting story to watch. There's going to be a lot of guys like that on this team. Where does Trey McGowan's fit into that?
Yeah.
This next year, where does Bryce McGowan's fit into that here in a year or two, depending on how his career goes? There's a lot of different guys like that, and Nebraska's kind of got those guys in the fold now and are adding more and bringing guys like that in on visits. We talked about June being a big recruiting month for the football team. It's been huge for Nebraska basketball too, just with the high level guys they're bringing in, and they kind of got one last little weekend here before that kind of dies down. They start going out on the road in July. They're in the running for a guard, Raymel Lloyd Jr. I believe we might have talked about this last week. Who's going to commit on Saturday, the 27th. So whole other discussion, but it gives you an idea of the direction this is going. And it's kind of been going that way for a while. So yeah, super interesting to see Delano perform well there, and interesting to see how he kind of comes back from that. And after he had a rough second half of the year after the COVID thing, and Fred Hoiberg was honest and frank about it and said the COVID shutdown affected Dalano Banton maybe more than anybody else on that team. And it was pretty obvious, he had a solid beginning to the year, but he really struggled over those last, whatever you want to call it, month and a half, 2 months, and it was pretty obvious that it did affect him. So now you got the full off season. You've got this feedback from the G League Elite camp. You've probably got some confidence coming out of that. And now you've got some more weapons around you from a shooting standpoint, hypothetically, that can make you look even better and make your job even easier, where you're not being asked to take a lot of outside jumpers and things like that. So, yeah, it's going to be super interesting. I'm hoping to go over there and watch a team workout here in the next couple of weeks when they get into July. So we'll maybe get a better grasp then. But, yeah, pretty intriguing stuff, I think, for Dalano as he comes back from this and Nebraska moves forward in summer workouts.
Well, you know what won't be long after the summer workouts?
What's that, Parker?
November 16th against Creighton.
You read my mind. That's called a segue, folks. Nebraska, Creighton, bit of an odd, I guess you could call it odd. I don't know. They made it part of the Gavitt games this year. The announcement came out today. The game is going to be November 16th. It's a Tuesday night, I believe, here in Lincoln. Part of the Gavitt games. This game's normally played in December. Has been pretty much throughout its history, going back to 77, 78 was the first season that they started this current string of playing each other. And they played in November a handful of times, maybe 3 or 4 times since then. But it's been early December, mid-December, pretty much every year since the 1970s. So it's unclear why they made it part of the Gavitt games. I suppose it was just easier to do that. You already had Big East, Big Ten built in. You put it, there's probably TV contracts they had to fill, things like that, all that stuff. So game will be in Lincoln. First time it's been in Lincoln since 2018, which is kind of wild to think about. That was the game that, of course, Nebraska beat Creighton. Tim Miles kind of got under Greg McDermott's skin at the beginning, called out Greg for being out of the coach's box early in the game. Greg was barking at Tim. James Palmer came down, hit 3 threes in the first 5 minutes of the game. And it's as good an atmosphere as PBA's had since I've been covering the team for the last 5 years or so. So, yeah, it'd be interesting to see what that game looks like. That's early in the year. You're probably talking about second, third game of the year for Nebraska and for Creighton for that matter. So it'd be interesting to see what it looks like compared to maybe getting it played a month later. Creighton's replacing all 5 starters and a lot of their bench. They lost a lot of the Sweet 16 team. Nebraska, of course, as we've talked about, returning a bunch of stuff, a bunch of players, a bunch of pieces. So we knew this game was going to be interesting. Now this kind of adds another wrinkle to it, a random Tuesday, probably a Tuesday night, I'm guessing, in downtown Lincoln to see what that one looks like.
It's going to be that's shaping up to be a relatively sizable week in Nebraska athletics. You've got Tuesday night, Nebraska and Creighton in Lincoln. Volleyball's at home that weekend, Friday, Saturday, and Nebraska football is at Wisconsin, I think, on the 20th. So,
there you go.
That's going to be a busy week for the Journal Star sports crew.
It's going to be a busy couple weeks because I think we talked about it here, from the Big Red Blitz. Fred talked about doing an exhibition against a Power 5 team. They'll have a game in the Big Ten ACC Challenge somewhere in there. It sounds like they're going to play an SEC team somewhere. They got a game with Kansas State. That's later on in December. But, yeah, it's shaping up. Those last couple months of 2021, we're going to be making up for lost time from last year when it comes to stuff to do and interesting stuff to watch. So yeah, it'll be a fun stretch when we get to it.
No doubt about it.
Anything
That'll
else?
Be really great. That'll be really great. That week's always fun. The short turnaround from the Saturday before Thanksgiving to Black Friday for Iowa back in Lincoln.
Yeah.
Plus hoops it's gonna be great.
Because Iowa comes here this year, right?
Yep.
Okay. Well, that we don't have to drive to Iowa City, so there is that.
The longest drive in the history of the planet.
The longest 5-hour drive in the universe. Yeah. It's rough. So, all right, guys, we're going to wrap this baby up. Parker, anything else for the good of the cause before we shut her down?
I don't think so. No.
All right.
I don't think so.
Well, maybe Sip will be back next week. Maybe not. Probably not. Who knows? We don't know where he is right now. He could be anywhere in the lower 48.
He could be anywhere. I think literally right now as the clock turns to 3 p.m. on Thursday, I believe he's on the radio in Omaha.
Oh, well, there you go.
And then leaving to go to the airport in the middle of the show. That's my understanding of this.
If you want to see a performance, I would recommend Steven Sipple trying to navigate an airport by himself. So we He won't listen to this, so it doesn't matter. Anyway, we'll talk to you guys next week. Thanks for tuning in. We'll talk to you soon.